atheist, believing that death is the final event in a person's life, believes that there is nothing worse than death. Sir, I'm not the one who prays to God to keep me from dying. From the believer's viewpoint, this is not so. This is because to the believer, there is an afterlife. Therefore, there are things worse than death, i.e. the corruption and immorality that God washed away in the flood. Gee, I guess he didn't know it was only going to come back, huh? One more idea I would like to bounce off your head is the gambler's theory. Let us suppose, hypothetically, that you, an atheist, and I, a believer, are in a car traveling down a highway. Suddenly, another car traveling in the opposite direction crosses the median and runs into us head-on, killing the both of us. At that moment, we would both find out which of our philosophies is correct. Either I am right, and I will go to heaven because of my faith, and you will go to hell for your lack of faith. Or you are right, and our lives will end at that moment. The gambler realizes that the believer has everything to gain by believing, gaining salvation and access to heaven, and nothing to lose. The atheist, on the other hand, has everything to lose and nothing to gain. If he is right in his beliefs and is killed, he's finished. If he is wrong, he'll spend the rest the wiser. You jerk. You jerk. It's that kind of mentality the casinos are built on. By the way, sir, the gambler would not take the bet. The gambler would say, well, let's see. If I do... Well, let us equate it to a lottery ticket. If I do buy the lottery ticket, there's a chance I might win. If I don't buy the lottery ticket, there's no chance that I can win. But in any event, the likelihood is that I won't win, so I won't waste my dollar. That's what the gambler's choice would be, sir. The gambler is not the one who buys the lottery ticket. It's the fool who does. But nonetheless, incidentally, I am a believer, but my belief is based on rational evidence rather than a gambler's paranoia. It's not a case of wisdom, sir. It's one of intellectual honesty. You don't have any of either. Even for atheists or skeptics such as yourself, there is substantial evidence to convince. Not long ago, I read an article, not in a religious journal, about people, including former atheists, who had temporarily died on surgery in hospitals or in other situations. All of those reported in the article, including the atheists, claim to have religious and inspiring experiences, claiming to have seen already dead relatives or the proverbial wise old man with a long white beard and shiny white robe, or some similar figure seeming to be God or Christ. See McCall's Magazine, February 1988, pages 103 and 106. Sir, there is a medical explanation for that. A medical explanation, sir. I too, sir, by the way, have talked to trees. And they've talked back. Does that mean trees talk? Another opinion I'd like to express is that the rabbi was wrongly said to be avoiding answering questions put to him. The point I'd like to make is that when one asks a question, he expects an answer out of what the inquirer believes to be an acceptable set of possible answers. What we can learn depends upon what we already know, perceive, and upon our preconceived model of reality and the university. Okay? If the rabbi gives an answer we don't expect, or one that doesn't fit into what we consider to be one of the acceptable set of possibilities, our reaction is to say that he is avoiding the question. Instead, I believe that the rabbi was simply answering the questions based upon his own preconceived notions about reality and the universe. This is all that can be expected from anyone. One final note. Not long after tuning in your show, I became quite appalled at your behavior and conduct. The way you treat your guest and those who call in is absolutely deplorable. Why can't you conduct a conversation without flying off the handle? Overreacting by shouting, yelling obscenities, and telling people they think with their heads up their anuses is not only tasteless and immature, but entirely unprofessional. Gee, I guess he's also now a media critic, too. Moreover, your inability to keep calm is a classic manifestation of insecurity and a lack of confidence in your own beliefs. No, sir, writing anonymous letters without return addresses. That is a classic, just an absolute classic sign of insecurity and a lack of confidence. I, sir, go out of my way to address issues publicly, using my real name. But if you really believe in what you say, there is no reason to be so defensive. Such conduct may end up causing you to lose your program. Yesterday was the first time I heard your show, and may very well be the last time. I don't hold in very high esteem people who let themselves say profanities over the air, or call people morons who think with their heads up their behinds. It would be a good idea for you to publicly apologize for such behavior the next time you go on the air, and endeavor to refrain from such conduct in the future, you arrogant, miserable SOB. 24 and a half minutes after the hour of 12 noon, I'm going to spend some considerable time addressing this letter, and addressing all of the self-righteous, arrogant people out there who not only dare to try to think for me, but frankly dare to try to think for God as well. Have any of you ever gone to the beach or maybe out into the desert first thing in the morning and watched the sun come up? It's an incredible sight. Majesty, glory, beauty that no man could create. Not only is it beautiful, but it gives life. Life as we know it would not exist if that ball of fire was not just the precise distance away that it is. If it did not show up every morning exactly on time, life would not exist. It is an all-inspiring view. And when you sit there and think about it, it's enough to drive you insane. How did it happen? Why did it happen? What happens when it goes away? Did you ever gaze up into the sky at night and see countless numbers of twinkling lights and realize that some of that light has been traveling for millions and millions and millions of years before it ever reached this earth, before anyone ever saw it? Try to contemplate the fact that the source of that light may be long gone, may have been gone before this earth was created, and yet the light shines on. The vastness of the universe. Try to conceive of that. I can't. I can't even conceive of a light year. Oh, I know exactly what it is, but I can't conceive of it. I can't conceive of a space without beginning, without end, or a black hole, or I don't know why things revolve around other bodies and stay within an orbit and don't vary from it. I don't know why the Earth goes around on its axis exactly the same amount of time every day and has for as long as any of us are aware of and is likely to continue. I can't conceive of any of this. It is beyond my ability to comprehend. Did you ever really stop to think about the complexity of the human body? Not just that gray matter in between your ears that stores data, has instant recall, can create abstract thoughts, but even down to the liver. What a marvel. I pretend not to understand any of it. It is beyond my ability to comprehend. How or why life happens, how it all started, or when it might end, is beyond my capability to understand. I do not know if there is any purpose for our being here. I have no way of knowing. Nor if there is any explanation. It's all beyond me. How ridiculous to pretend to have the answers. How absurd to pretend to know what it all means. Yet many people have the utter, unmitigated gall to pretend that they do know. Is there a heaven? Well, I have just as much proof of it as you have. None. Is there a hell? I have just as much proof of it as you have. None. Does that mean there isn't? No, it doesn't. Because I have no proof that they don't exist either. Is there an afterlife? My answer is that I do not know. Nor do I have any way of finding out. There is no one who is alive today who has any concrete knowledge of these things. Any more so than there is anyone who knows exactly how far it is to the end of the universe. There are theories, there are guesses, nothing more, nothing less. Nor is there any reason to suspect that any human being has ever lived. who did know. The knowledge that I have acquired over the years, frankly, is damned considerable. Unless you compare it to what I have no knowledge of at all. Things like geometry, chemistry, plumbing. To me, it is a miracle that the area of a triangle can be calculated with a paper and a pencil and a formula. I can't begin to imagine how anyone conceived of that. It's a miracle that by mixing together some chemicals, you can get a great explosive force or change something from liquid to solid or from liquid to gas or whatever it might be. These are miracles that I have no comprehension of at all. They are mysteries to me. Should I hold those who understand them to be gods? I think not. Not one person on the face of this earth is without some knowledge that most others do not have. I accept my limitations, and I make the very best of them. I will never understand higher forms of mathematics, just as I will never unravel the questions about how life came to be or how it reproduces itself or anything else. But because I do not understand these things does not mean that there is a supreme being or a God. It doesn't mean that there isn't either. Well, there may well be supreme beings, or even just one. Should there be an intelligence that is solely responsible for creating, from my concept of nothing, the entire universe as I know it, then obviously a guy who cannot quite get a grip on algebra is not going to be able to comprehend the power, the intelligence of the so-called supreme being. And if there is indeed a supreme being who created me with all of my flaws and shortcomings, like being unable to calculate the area of a circle or a triangle, then I feel reasonably sure that he, she, it would well understand my inability to even rationally contemplate the mysteries of life. And if there is indeed the supreme being who is solely responsible for the creation of all that is my world, including myself, then he, she, it would fully understand that with the abilities given to me, I could come up with no better answer to such questions as is there a God or who created the universe, etc., than I don't know. But simply because I do not know is not in and of itself proof of the existence of a supreme being, is it? Simply because I don't have answers doesn't mean there are answers. In fact, just saying that since I cannot understand the reasons, the purpose of things, so therefore there must be a God, is in fact a cop-out. It's nothing more than getting around to admitting that there may never be answers to the questions that have stumped man from the beginning of time. I have no objection to there being a God. I have no problem with it. It doesn't threaten me. To tell you the truth, it would make it a hell of a lot easier in life, wouldn't it? If we knew for sure. Make it real easy. I have no objection to you believing in a God, so long as your belief does not interfere with my ability to believe as I choose to. The only problem I have with God, and let's put some quotation marks around that word God, is the way that most people conceptualize him. To be as blunt as I know how to be, it is an insult to one's intelligence. I do not deny the very existence of God. I can't. What I do deny is the existence of the absurd. Evil spirits and demons. Chosen people that God looks upon favorably, more favorably than others. Preference for one sex over another. Demanding meaningless rituals be performed to glorify him. The God that most people accept today did not create man, man created him. There can be no other explanation. The book that purports to explain in great detail just what it is that God wants of man is so flawed as to be an insult to God, let alone to my intelligence. Does it mean that there is no God? Does it mean that there is no God if you refuse to accept that it was a talking snake who was sent to tempt Eve in the Garden of Eden? Does that mean there is no God if you don't accept that? Does it mean that there is no God if you refuse to accept the backwards account of creation? Does it mean that there is no God if you refuse to accept that women suffer pain? As a matter of fact, all female animals suffer pain in childbirth as the result of somebody eating some fruit? Does it mean that there is no God if you refuse to accept that people lived for hundreds of years without any medicine? Does it mean that there is no God if you refuse to accept that people roamed around a small desert for 40 years? Millions upon millions upon millions of them, and were fed from the heavens with manna? Does it mean there is no God if you refuse to accept that a man was swallowed by a whale? Does it mean there is no God if you refuse to accept that the earth was destroyed by a flood? And the two of each kind were housed in a ridiculously small boat? Does it mean that there is no God if you refuse to accept that God instructed his chosen people to kill and to rob and to rape and to loot and to plunder? Does it mean there is no God if you refuse to accept that God took cheap shots at women every chance that he got? Does it mean there is no God if you refuse to accept that one form of acknowledging his greatness is more acceptable to him than another? Does it mean there is no God if you refuse to accept that he hands out horrible punishments just to prove his greatness? Does any of this make any sense? Well, of course it doesn't. And it is rejected by the overwhelming majority of thinking human beings as foolishness. It is rejected by the overwhelming majority of believers as foolishness and fable. One can believe in the existence of a supreme being, a God, and refuse to accept any of this, because most of us have come to that realization that these stories are the product of men, most with the best of intentions, some with the most despicable of intentions. It is generally conceded that the stories were concocted to either make a point, to teach a lesson, or to keep people under control, and that they are anything but fact. They're too ridiculous to be fact. They're too stupid to be fact. You can believe in God while rejecting that he spent his time designing robes for priests, or in compounding formulas for perfumes, or that he preferred one type of meat over another for a sacrifice, or that he wrestled with anyone, or that he repeatedly hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he could impress the locals with one disaster after another. You can believe in God and reject all of that as nonsense. You can believe in God and still reject the notion that disease was caused by evil spirits dwelling in the body of the afflicted, and that was the only cause of disease. You can believe in God and reject the notion that God cared about how a man trimmed his beard, that was important to him, or that whether or not one masturbates is of any real concern to God. You can believe in God and at the same time reject these absurdities because they are absurd and clearly have nothing whatsoever to do with the Almighty. They are the creation of man, that man attributed to God for one reason or another. Yet all of these things that I have just mentioned, that almost all of you agree are absurd are the very heart and soul of the Bible, the very foundation of the understanding that we have of, quote-unquote, God. And the vast majority of believers reject virtually every account of God as contained in the only reference that we have that purports to be His Word. That doesn't make any sense. It's the only reference we have that attempts to prove His very existence. And while the majority of believers reject as absurd the concept that God is the God referred to in this book, they eagerly embrace still another notion, the convoluted and selfish idea that God sent His only Son to suffer and die for your sins in some grand scheme that goes back to Eve eating the apple, that somehow is the only road to salvation. Does it make any sense whatsoever that you can be forgiven for your sins not by attempting to undo them, but simply by believing that they were already paid for?
Greyhound presents something new for travelers who weren't born yesterday.
I'm called names. I'm threatened. People try to do me harm. I am told that I must at least accept some of it, even if it doesn't make any sense to me, to find inner peace and to avoid everlasting punishment. Well, I have found inner peace, thank you. Because I don't accept the absurd. And insofar as everlasting punishment is concerned, well, it appears as though there is indeed everlasting punishment, at least as everlasting as a human being is capable of comprehending. And it comes at the hands of those very people who already admit that they themselves do not swallow the whole story. Not one living soul does or ever has swallowed the whole story. Not one. Because the story contradicts itself. And so consequently you are forced to say, well, I think that's what he meant, yeah, this time. And the other time he said, that's God's wisdom. No two individuals agree on every point, on every detail, on every meaning, on every fact contained in the book. Each has his or her own interpretation. How absurd, how arrogant to presume that a mere mortal is capable of reading between the lines of God's own book. It is the height of arrogance. It is the height of hypocrisy. It is the height of absurdity to presume that a mere mortal is capable of reading between the lines of God's own book. So you see, I'm no different in spirit than anyone else. I'm no different in spirit than you. We only differ in degree. You reject some of it, I reject all of it. But we also have another difference. I am deeply, deeply offended whenever I hear someone justifying his own prejudice by saying that, well, that's the way God wants it. I don't necessarily agree, but that's the way God wants it. I am deeply offended when fanatics try to suppress learning by confusing fable with fact. I am deeply offended when entire classes of people are looked down upon using God as an excuse. I am deeply offended when ignorance is perpetuated, when superstition is kept alive because some religionist refuses to let go of his evil spirits and his devils. I am deeply offended when it is suggested that God looks more favorably on one nation than another. I am deeply offended when asked to affirm my word by placing my hand on a book full of atrocities and contradictions. A book that describes God as a monster. I am deeply offended by that, and you should be too. I do not know if indeed there is a God up in heaven, but what I am sure of is that if he is there, he must be good and kind and loving and just and merciful and compassionate. And I will defend to my last breath the concept that God is cruel, or that he is judgmental, or that he is prejudiced, or that he is a sexist, or a murderer, or a destroyer. I cannot understand how anyone who professes to love his God could do otherwise. I cannot understand how anyone who professes a love for this God that I'm not even sure exists would not join with me to banish from the face of this earth the awful view that now exists of God, conceived, created, and nurtured by ignorant men whose intentions may well have started out good, but have become anything but. Why are you not deeply offended when your Savior is purported as a man who believed in spirits? Why are you not deeply offended when your Savior, supposedly the Son of God, the creator of the universe, believes, as it says in the book, that illness is evil spirits and can be driven out by uttering some words? I am proud to say that I do not believe in the God of the Bible. I am proud to say that I reject him, because the real God could not be one in the same. I am deeply offended when I hear tales of how God put a special star in the sky so that 3 guys riding camels could come by and drop off some expensive gifts. I am deeply offended when I hear tales of how the Son of God came to the earth and in order to impress the locals said, well, hey, let's change some water into wine. That'll really, show them who I am. These are offensive to, I would believe, anybody who genuinely thought. And if such beliefs make me an outcast, then I gladly accept that role. If these beliefs make me a monster in your eyes, then I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll ask God to forgive you if I ever run into him. In the meantime, I accept the role. Is there an afterlife? I have no reason to suspect otherwise. If indeed there is a God and there is a heaven. Though for the life of me, I cannot figure out what this God would want with such ignorant and foolish beings that think that he is concerned with the shape of a man's beard and the demons and werewolves roam the earth. Or people that think that they can rob and cheat and plunder and then only have to ask for forgiveness and recite a few words rather than try to restore those that they sinned against. If that makes me a monster, then damn it, I'm pleased to be one. I did not come upon these thoughts because somebody laid them out for me. I did not come to believe this way under the threat of everlasting damnation if I chose not to believe this way. Can you say the same about your beliefs? Should you choose to continue to call me names for my beliefs, then I think that it's all the more evidence that your God does not exist. If you continue to be so arrogant as to try to sway me from my hard-found beliefs, then again I say to you, this is still more proof. I at least had the courtesy to explain my rationale, rather than to cook up some pathetic gambler's choice analogy. You see, if I'm firm in my convictions, it would never enter my mind that the God of the Bible is a man-made creation. I'll bet that good old gambler's choice theory made a lot of sense to many of you, didn't it? It did because you know that what I've just explained makes sense. You believe only because you're afraid not to believe. Is that the way God would want it? I do not deny the existence of a God. In fact, I strongly suspect that a supreme power does indeed exist. It's just that since I have no record of him, have had no communication, I refuse to pretend that I know anything about him. I refuse to pretend that I know anything about his will or his intentions, let alone his accomplishments. I am not that arrogant. I accept that if there is a power that created the universe, then there is no real way that this being could relate to something as insignificant as me. The letter writer accused me of having the gall to suggest that I was claiming to be as wise as God. Well, I beg to differ. It's he and all that think like him that make that claim. I only pointed out stupidity and illogic. It was I who hastened to point out that God could not be so flawed. It was the writer who insisted that he was. The truth of the matter is that I am the one, and one of the very few, thank you, who consistently defends God, who refuses to allow people to blame him for their own shortcomings. I'm the one who attempts to point out when man tries to play God. I'm the one who will not tolerate allowing God to be held responsible for man's monstrous behavior. Can you say that of yourself? Can you say it of your clergyman? When you accept the God of the Old Testament, you're saying that God is a monster. I will not let you get away with that. When you accept the God of the New Testament, you're saying that you have no responsibility for your own actions. I will not let you get away with that. And when you try to join the two of them together, you create a paradox, and I will not let you get away with that either. Nor will I suffer people who try to tell me that they are on the same level as God. That is, they communicate with, they understand and interpret for God. When I say that I do not know whether or not God exists, that I have no proof and therefore cannot say, I merely acknowledge my own insignificance, lending credence to the possibility that there probably is a higher being. You do the exact opposite when you say, hey, I know what God had in mind. When someone tells me that for sure there is a supreme being, that he or she is in touch with him, then I know that I've run into a person who has too great a concept of his own self-worth. Someone who really has no concept of a higher being. All I can do is to lead my life as best as I can, to do as little damage along the way as possible, and to try to repair whatever I destroy. I rely on my own inherent instincts to tell me right from wrong, and they have yet to fail me. I have failed them, but they have yet to fail me. And that is a full-time job, ladies and gentlemen, and it leaves me no time for meaningless symbolism, nor for poring over convoluted texts of questionable origin in some vain attempt to figure out just what the big guy was trying to say. How could I? I am but a mere mortal. The one thing that I do know for sure. And what a pity more of us have not come to that same understanding about ourselves. I cannot help but feel that he, God, would be proud of me for at least trying to defend him. And that if he does hand out rewards for good deeds, I may get one yet. Can you say the same? Any better than that? I'll just give you the phone numbers now, and you can comment on it one way or the other. In Hillsborough, 990-9352. There are two lines open, 990-9352. In Pinellas, 461-9352, 461-WFLA, and of course, excuse me, there is the practical joke line, 1-223-9797. Chuck in Clearwater. Chuck, you're on the air, WFLA.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
I agree with what you're saying. Did you ever hear a saying that goes, any technology insufficiently understood will be indistinguishable from magic?
No, I haven't, but it certainly makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Great deal.
I mean, to a guy 5,000 years ago, if I took a .38, shot another man, didn't I strike him down with my hand?
I suppose you did.
Ain't I a god?
I suppose so.
I think you got a great opinion, Bob.
Thank you, Chuck.
I agree with it.
Thank you. 990-9352 in Hillsborough, 461-9352 in Pinellas. Please don't, by the way, call me and tell me I have a great opinion, okay? Jane and Sefner. Jane, you're on the air, WFLA.
So that guy is such a big weenie who wrote that letter. I can't believe it. I think maybe part of our eternal punishment is that we have to suffer with the small-minded and limited intelligence of bigoted people such as this anonymous person who wrote this letter, and that they're so self-righteous. And, you know, it never ceases to amaze me that Christian people, that they whine and cry that people won't believe the way they want them to believe. But then when they try and force people to think their way, they can't understand why people don't accept it. I just can't.
I think the thing that probably made me the most sick with this letter was the writer's response to something I frequently harp on, and that is the Bible's very derogatory view toward women. And again, rather than the writer saying, well, gee, you know, I don't understand it either, it doesn't seem to make sense to me, it must be a mistake, instead of doing that, he writes, whether or not we like God's will is totally irrelevant. We cannot disagree with it or ignore it into non-existence. Just because we might not like God's will doesn't mean it is wrong or invalid. That was his excuse for God's policy. Quote again, God's policy toward women.
Well, I don't know that that's that's his excuse, but also, you know, in my way of thinking, that's his simple rationale for the fact that he can't think any farther than his own, you know, by just spouting out what he, you know, parroting what he reads or sees or hears from somebody else. He has no.
Well, then there's another real strong possibility, and that is that the letter writer and God, apparently the God of the Bible, share the same prejudice against women.
Well, I hate to think that my God is that way, because otherwise I'm in big trouble, huh? You know, I guess because I'm a woman that I'm just going to be condemned to garbage pickup in heaven when I get there or whatever, huh?
Well, you've already been condemned by the God of the Bible.
I'm unclean because I'm a female and I'm unclean.
That's right.
It never ceases to amaze me, the stuff that some of these people come up with. And then they wonder why that their efforts at proselytizing don't do any better than they do. I'm always offended by people who try and proselytize, because by the mere meaning of the word, it means that somebody is trying to change my mind to their way of thinking, which is, you know, that takes away your rights as an individual human being, which people who purport to believe in the Bible say that God gave them the opportunity to make their own decisions as to what they believe and what they don't believe. But this guy's going to tell us what we should believe. And he couldn't think up of any better reason than to gamble on it.
And then, of course, he doesn't understand the gambler's mentality. The gambler wouldn't touch that bet with a 10-foot pole.
Well, doesn't the Bible say you're not supposed to gamble? I mean,
Well,
I don't
that
really
too,
know
yeah.
for sure, but I mean, wouldn't that kind of be considered a sin?
Well, I guess it would be. I guess it would be.
Enough to believe all that other stuff, then.
Well, he just thought I was going to be dazzled with his logic and, you know, say, oh, my God, the letter writer's so right. Give me the Bible. Let me start reading it.
Well, you know.
Change my ways.
I hate to say this, but it's hard for me to conceive that a God that could create something as perfect and as beautiful as a sunset or Gauguin or Matisse or great talent and great artists and great writers and thinkers that we've had since creation could create a mind so small and so bigoted and so limited.
It argues very strongly against God, doesn't it?
Who are trying to convert other people to Christianity. It's no wonder. I mean, we've got the swaggarts.
Well, this kind of letter writer is relatively few and far between. This type of zealot, this type of blind fool is really the exception. What astonishes me, what will always astonish me, is that the vast majority of good, decent people will not stand together in a body and call a spade and point out the flaws in that book and do away with it. I don't know what that book has to do with the belief in God.
Well,
I don't know what that book has to do with salvation.
If a person wants to stand up, I look at it this way. If a person if I want to stand up and say that I believe in the Bible and I believe in God and I am a quote-unquote Christian, that's fine. But when I start trying to shove it down somebody else's throat with, under the guise of saying that this is the only thing that I have is this Bible and you should believe it just because I say so, then I think that's wrong.
Again, I don't know what the book has to do with Christianity. I do not know why you need that book to believe that the Son of God came to this earth to teach his children the way to everlasting happiness. I don't know why you've got to believe that along the way he turned some water into wine at a wedding reception to impress people with his greatness. That is absurd. It's crazy.
It's all so much open to debate because, it seems like anymore that debating on Christianity has become a vogue thing to do. Everybody wants to get their little show in or their little, TV program, and they want to all tell us why we should send them money so that they can, pray for our souls to get to heaven and all, and this is the only way to go. But people who do things like this guy did, he wrote this letter. From what you said, I was driving in my car, and you say he didn't type very well, and he didn't even sign his own name, and he writes all this rigmarole, this garbage.
Oh, there is a name signed to it, but there is not an address, so consequently I can't verify that it was really this name, and I'm not going to give out the name.
So you don't even really have any way of knowing who this guy is. It does. These people are so self-righteous, and they're so self-contained that they just want to tell other people how to think, and I've always just really disliked people like that. Very dogmatic, limited. He's probably got about the mind and intelligence of a Ken doll. So, anyway, I agree with you.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate it. Take care.
Right.
990-9352 in Hillsborough, 461-9352 in Pinellas. Vic in St. Petersburg. Vic, you're on the air, WFLA.
Yes, you're talking to someone who has been saved by grace and is a firm believer in Jesus Christ.
Firm believer in something that you don't know exists.
Through experience with religion. And that I know the difference between not having any religion and the value of being...
See, here you are, just another self-righteous, arrogant man who's going to tell me that would have me believe that you walk with the gods.
No, I did not walk with it. I've seen Jesus Christ and was saved.
Like I said, you walked with the gods. You know exactly what he has in mind, precisely what his plan is. Nobody else knows but you, Vic, because everybody that reads the book comes up with a different interpretation.
I've seen Jesus Christ and was healed of a terrible affliction which kept me sick for 7 or 8 years.
Oh, what a tragedy, Vic. You mean, Vic, do you mean to tell me, Vic, that Jesus kept you away from paradise? He healed you of this thing that would have brought you to him in paradise, and you're thankful because you have been denied paradise, Vic?
I actually saw the Spirit of the Holy Spirit.
Right, just ignore what I just said, Vic, because it doesn't make a damn bit of sense what you're saying, does it, Vic? You are thankful that you have been kept from being with your Savior.
Well, listen, I'll tell you something about you.
Now you're going to talk. Well, hey, since you can tell me about God, it should be a piece of cake for you to tell me about me.
All right, let me tell you something I have learned about people who are committing the unpardonable sin, and that's what you're doing. You're denying the existence.
Committing the unpardonable sin of defending God?
And something terrible is going to happen to you someday, and you're going to call
No,
God.
Vic, you only wish it would happen to me.
No.
Why don't you pray to your God that it does, Vic? You probably already have.
No, I'm not threatening you, but something will happen
give
in
me
your
a
life.
break, Vic. You're trying to scare the hell out of me, if you'll pardon the expression.
People like you will get punished.
Oh, yeah. Come on, Vic.
And
pray for the day.
You.
No, of course you're not threatening me, Vic. No,
punished.
of course not. No.
You're going to be punished for it because you deny the existence of God, and that's the unpardonable sin.
No, Vic, I don't deny the existence of God. I'm just deeply offended at what people try to attribute to God. Little things like punishing me.
Well,
I'm deeply offended by that, Vic, that your God walks around punishing people.
Well, I think your trouble is you're nigger rich. That's the trouble. You got too much money and too good a life.
Nigger rich, Vic?
Yeah.
Oh, too much money and too good a life. Huh?
That's right. And you don't need anybody else. You also have a superiority complex.
Yeah.
If you would deal in some other subject, I respect you very highly because I would be most enjoyable.
Vic, please do me a favor. Don't dare respect me. Not you, you subhuman pig. Nigger-rich Vic? Try the other station on for size. If I ever hear your voice on the station again on my show or any other, I will personally, Vic, pull the plug. You're a despicable subhuman pig. Again, you deeply offend me, Vic, by trying to tell me that God healed you, that God saved you. That is deeply offensive. And anybody that stands up for that offends me just as much as you. James in Tampa. James, you're on the air at WFLA.
Yes, I was wondering what you thought of the subjectivism, as most people would base their knowledge of what you say and what the Bible is. It seems that that's a main problem from wherever anybody comes from. They tend to base whatever they're saying on their own opinion and have a difficult time with any outside input.
Oh, no, James, I quite disagree with you. Most people form their opinions based upon someone else's.
Oh, well,
This is mine.
The ultimate thing is they cannot put that into perspective enough to deal with it. It's like they're on a monopoly type of situation, and when they come to go, they're all set, and they go out, and when they reach one corner, they're at the go to jail, which may be the hell thing, and then you get halfway around, and you're meet God, where He says go to jail and or go to heaven. You can bypass that and keep on the way to go. And once you come around again to go, you're stuck on this limited board. You only have so many spaces, and you tend to retrace your steps all the time. Seems to be whenever I talk to someone, they're highly opinionated, and they only know a certain number of squares, and they keep coming back to go, which is where I am. I just wanted to maybe consider that for as a problem in dealing with such a vast subject as God. You may not have as much knowledge and base your knowledge.
Well, James, didn't you listen to a word I said?
Sure, you called God big guy and this type of thing.
I called God the big guy. I said, no, James, what I spent an hour of my life trying to explain to a simpleton like you, what a gross waste of my time, what a fool I am. I should have talked about professional wrestling or Monopoly. I suppose I would have tad more up here.
Wrestling I love.
I bet you do. James, what I said is that, you see, I do not have an opinion of God because I am a mere mortal, James. A mere mortal. How could I possibly have any concept of God and what his intentions are, what his views are, what his prejudices are, what his accomplishments have been, what he's going to do in the future? James, what I also spent an hour of my life, obviously wasted breath on you, explaining was how deeply offended I am by people who speak for God. I cannot think of anything more absurd. And you, sir...
for yourself. That is rather absurd. You tend to speak...
Speaking for myself is absurd? Well, I guess in your neighborhood, James, speaking for yourself would be absurd.
Your doctor has a new treatment than
Here at WFLA.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. You know, I called you when you were on the defunct station, so it's been quite some time. And I've waited for over a year for you to have a show like this. If you don't mind, let me just back up a little to give you a little scenario of where I'm coming from. I was raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was raised in an orphanage, and a lot of the business people, generally the well-to-do or middle-income people, would come by the orphanage. It was relatively small. We had about 30 kids. And each week they would take, on a Sunday, one of the children to their church. Sunday afternoon meal was the big meal there where family got together, and whatever activities they had planned for their children, we participate in as well. It was sort of a thing to make us feel part of a family. So I went to the Catholic Church one Sunday, and I was told, you're supposed to pray through a priest. You know, you aren't supposed to talk through God. Then I'd go to a Seventh-day Adventist church, and I'd see the women covered up. This was something God had created, a beautiful thing, but they had to wear all their clothes covering their legs, their arms, everything. Then I'd be in the synagogue, and I was told that they're the chosen people, so I felt left out. I said, well, I might as well kill myself right now. Since I'm not Jewish, I'm not chosen person. But it just, you know, I had an opportunity, thank goodness, at an early age to see these different things and be able to pick them apart. Well, when I got married and I had a child, I found out that because Adam and Eve decided to make whoopee in the Garden of Eden, that they were punishing my child for this. And he hadn't even reached puberty yet.
Also punished your wife, too, by the way.
Pardon me?
Also punished your wife in making her go through unbearable pain in childbirth.
All of us, because two people decided to make whoopee several thousand years ago. Then they start teaching my son in school that the man, which defies all biological and physical, he walked across the water, and yet in the same breath they say he was on the cross and bled like any other human being. And they said that the king came out and killed all the male babies looking for Jesus. So instead of letting him, a beautiful God, letting him just destroy the king, why did he let all these babies be killed? And I went to the schools defiant and said, don't you dare confuse my son like this. I wound up on a talk show in Charlotte, North Carolina, the home of, by the way, Billy Graham, the PTL. They called the talk show and said they would be waiting for me outside the station when I got off. These are these God-fearing, ever-forgiving Christian people. They were ready to hurt me. I had to have a police escort take me to my home. And if you doubt that, there's somebody that's working in this town right now that was working at another station at the time. He had it on the 6 o'clock news that night, and that's John Wilson. So these are these wonderful, forgiving Christians that because of this Bible, when you speak out against that Bible, they're ready to do you bodily harm.
Is it not amazing that Christians do not want you to say that God is not a monster? If you try to say God is not a monster, then you're an atheist.
Oh, that's it.
You know, God,
he caused the flood.
Hey, would you guys get off my back if I sit here and say, okay, you're right, I give up, God's a monster?
No, then they'd find something else. They'd find something else. But I'll tell you, if anyone wants to pick up a book that is full of murder, that is full of sadism, then pick up the Bible. That probably is the best-selling horror story in the world. And
of course, one of the great problems is that it's one of the least read books.
Yes.
A lot of people own it and don't read it.
And it's been so misinterpreted and so translated, and things are lost in translation, perhaps, and I only say perhaps, when it was written one way, and it's like lining 10 people up and starting a rumor, the little game we used to play in school. You know, by the time it gets to the 10th person, it's totally twisted around. But no, I have waited, like I said, for well over a year for you to come on with something like this, and thank goodness, I don't say thank God, no, thank goodness that you have done it. And I congratulate you for it.
Thank you, Robert. Be good.
Thank you.
127 the time, 990-9352 in Hillsborough, 461-9352 in Pinellas. Roger in Tampa. Roger, you're on the air, WFLA.
Yes, I grew up in a sort of a community of believers. That is, I didn't know anyone who was a non-believer. In fact, a non-believer was something like a three-headed dog, and it just wasn't thought of. But I also read a lot, and the more I read the Bible, other books, I became more and more skeptical, but in a way I was somewhat ashamed of my skepticism. That is, you know you had to believe, but as you read things, your mind kept saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And one of the books I read when I was in high school was Mark Twain's Letters from the Earth. This was about 22 years ago, something like this. And that book really got me to thinking that I could think these thoughts. But all during this period, I continued to pray. Even though I wasn't quite believing, I kept right on praying. It was one of these, I guess you call it one of these just-in-case prayers.
Yep.
I don't think there's a God, but just in case I would have prayed. But after a while,
Roger, you have no reason to suspect there isn't a God. You have no reason under the sun to suspect there isn't.
Yeah, but there's this praying of just in case. I felt to myself, I said, well, this is silly. If there is a God, and he is all-powerful, he knows I'm skeptical. I might can lie to someone else, but there's no point in praying or lying to God. If I'm really not sure, there's no point in it, so I quit. I mean, there was just no point in it. And the other point was that as I began to talk to people, I found out in non-believers were generally, that is, when I got older, in my late teens, early 20s, the non-believers were generally smarter, more knowledgeable about the world, and in many cases more knowledgeable about the Bible than the believers were. The believers would insist, and in many cases had no idea what they were talking about. Like the majority of cases had no idea what they were saying. The last guy I talked to a long time was a minister. And I listened to your Rabbi Bresky last week. This guy's kind of just like Rabbi Bresky. He said the same thing to me. If only you would find the Lord. You've read so much. You could reach so many people. You would have so much peace. I'm saying, wait a minute. You're trying to explain me. I don't understand you. And
I don't know how the hell you're supposed to get peace out of the fear of everlasting damnation.
Yeah,
It doesn't bring me a hell of a lot of peace to think about, burning in the lake of fire.
What really got me is when he looked me in the eye and said that he had more faith in the existence of God. He knew more about God's existence than he did mine. He said, I believe more in God than I believe in than you exist. I'm saying, wait a minute, here's some guy who doesn't believe his own eyes, but he believes something he's thought up in his mind. I couldn't figure it, but what's so strange about the guy's a nice guy. He has a regular job besides his ministry. But that's what I couldn't figure. He's not like someone on drugs or someone. He seems like an ordinary, everyday guy in most other ways, but he has these strange beliefs in this one area. And there are many Christians that I can't figure it out. They're ordinary, everyday people, so in this one area, they got this sort of it seems to be bizarre conclusions they come to.
Roger, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
990-9352 in Hillsborough, 990-WFLA.
Well, how you doing, old friend? This is Paul Gonzalez.
Judgment, and that you don't want to submit your life to God.
No, Scott, I don't submit my life to anyone. I judge myself, Scott, and I'm very capable, quite capable, thank you, of realizing when I've done wrong. I don't need a God to tell me.
I see, but you still don't want to submit yourself to his will.
I don't know what his will is, Scott. I am not a God myself. I couldn't possibly understand what his will is.
Well, his will is described right there in the Bible. You said, well, I don't have the concept in the Bible.
No, Scott. I'm told that that's his will. I have no way of knowing whether or not it is, and it would be very presumptuous of me to assume that it is.
Well, you're being very presumptuous on your part, saying that people that believe that this concept of God really don't believe the Bible in some way. They don't really believe it. But I'm telling you, it's the truth. They do believe it.
Well, I'm sorry, Scott. Even you reject portions of the Bible.
How so? Would you like to name a chapter and verse?
A chapter and verse? Well, let's talk, if we might, in some generalities here. Is God opposed to murder?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, Scott.
No?
No.
Why not?
He frequently sent people out to murder other people.
You mean one army versus another army?
No, I mean a group of chosen children, for example, who needed to expand their territory, so they went out and killed people who were living on the land that God gave them at the time.
Well, obviously, these people were so...
So I guess, you're either in favor of that or you're not in favor of it. You either reject one or the other, right, Scott?
Well, according to Moses, he brought down these 10 laws. Said, thou shalt not kill.
Right, and then Moses kept getting all of these great messages from God about going out and killing.
But even when
Remember?
brought
Remember,
down those
Scott?
laws,
Remember,
God
Scott?
destroyed 23,000
Remember,
people.
Scott? Remember?
Remember what, Bob?
Remember how Moses also sent the chosen children out to kill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, the gospel is foolishness to them that perish.
So which do you reject? God sending people out to kill people, or God saying don't kill people? Which do you reject?
No, I believe that God is sovereign. When he says, thou shalt not kill, he means it. But when he determines...
But sometimes he changes his mind. I know Scott,
No,
right?
he didn't change his mind. No, he didn't change his mind. When apparently these people were so depraved and evil, he saw fit to have them do that.
Yeah.
But the Bible's true, you know.
So you are here to testify to the fact that God is indeed a monster.
No, God is not a monster.
Well,
And
I'm sorry when you say even kill their cattle, so you're here to say that you're standing up for God. God is a monster. I'll put you down in God's a monster category over here in the survey this afternoon.
Well, if that's what you choose, but I didn't say that. Now, you said, show me the good God in the Bible. Well...
No, I didn't say
said,
show me the
"If
good...
you've seen me,
Not
you've seen the
Scott,
Father."
Scott, I've never said those words.
Oh, yeah, basically that's what you said.
No, Scott, don't dare put words in my mouth.
Well, you said
I've
that
never
God
said
in the
those
Old
words.
Testament is a monster, and
Yes, that's right.
the God in the New Testament, Jesus Christ, he's casting out spirits and changing water to wine to make a show of himself, that he's something...
Well, then Scott, why do you think he took these divine powers and used them for something so trivial as turning water into wine? Except he was trying to impress people, right?
I don't think so.
Well, what do you think? Why do you think he did it then, Scott?
But because he was God,
Why do you think he did it, Scott?
He could change
Why do you
anything
think
into
he did
anything
it,
else.
Scott? Why do you think he did it?
Because it was somebody's wedding, and he wanted to provide wine because they were out of wine.
I see. So this is the same God that allows millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people to starve in drought and in wars and all kinds of horrible things, but just because he was at a wedding reception and they ran out of wine. Well, hey, wait a second. I'm God over here. Yeah, me over here. Bring me some vats of water. We'll take care of this problem. Right, Scott, get off my phone, you jerk. Don in St. Petersburg. Don, you're on the air, WFLA.
Bobby, are you not great or what? I'm telling you, this is a great show. I have to, if I can, share with you about my quest on trying to find God and trying to get my act together spiritually. I don't know if you've ever been in a position in your life where you just wonder what it's all about.
Oh, about every other day.
Good. Then you can relate to this then. I went to a Baptist church, sat there for about 6 weeks, and all I heard of was what a wretch that I was. I decided to leave that church, and I went to what was called like a Grace Bethany church, and 2 weeks after I was there, the church broke up, literally broke up. Half of them went to a charismatic movement where they spoke in tongues, and the other half thought they were of the devil. Now, these are people who were sitting on the opposite sides of the pew. This is what really got me. I then went to a place called the Church of Christ, and all of these religions now, of course, are founded on the Bible, or in the Bible. And I sat there for 4 weeks, and I loved the church, intelligent people, and everyone there was singing a cappella. I thought maybe that the organ or the piano was out being fixed. This is how naive I was. The whole religion was based on not having any musical instruments in the church because it was offensive to God. I'll tell you something.
A lot of things offend God. Trimming your beard and the point does, too.
Well, it's almost ridiculous. I think that what happens is that the Bible apparently must lay down some type of rules for most people, and yet when they get ready to try and decipher them, they all come up with different ideas and different points of view. I have been leaning now towards this more of a metaphysical way, and you know what, Bob? I've come to the full realization that, boy, that God is no more or no less than what I in my own mind can understand. And coming to again...
What more could he possibly ask of you?
Isn't that the truth? But one more thing, though, is accepting the full responsibility for my actions and my attitudes. And that's something that a lot of people seem to have so much trouble with.
Well, that's why Christianity is so popular. You see, that's one of the great joys of Christianity is that you've got a devil that gives you the bad thoughts, and then you've got a God that says, hey, don't worry about doing that bad stuff. Hey, it's cool. I died on the cross, man, so you can get off the hook for this.
And look how limited that is about the only way to get into heaven is through Jesus Christ and through the vicarious atonement or through his act of dying on the cross.
look at the millions and millions of people since the beginning of time that is eliminated because they've not accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Savior.
I mean, if there was this loving, personal God, he wouldn't forgive the sinner, he'd forgive the sinned.
Exactly. And, I read something about Confucius. I really do admire him, but he wrote something where, let no error other than my own offend me. I like that. That kind of says it all in looking at other people. But I do want to correct one thing here. The word is omnipotent and not...
I know, I always say omnipotent.
All right, Bob. Anyway, God, I had to share. Keep up the work. Why don't you start up some type of a group? And in all honesty, I think what you're saying is not really even a new thought. I think probably...
Of course it isn't a new thought.
No.
But it's a very difficult thought to arrive at.
But I think that probably you'd really find that there's a lot of people who are very spiritual and may not practice a religion per se, but find a great deal of comfort with being with other people of the same accord of thought. But
I don't want to become a god, Don.
We're not speaking about becoming a god.
Yes, we are.
We're speaking about being able to share experiences and understanding that it's all right to be the person you are and that you're still growing.
No, I'm sorry. In a situation like that, he who is the best communicator becomes the new god. He who is best able to express. I beg your pardon.
Well, to me, the word God might mean ultimate to me. I think maybe being a teacher or a lecturer or someone, pointing a stick and saying, look, here's some thoughts for your consideration is not a God. It's just an instructor. That's not being fair. You are too much of a thinking person to make such a strong statement like that. Think what you just said.
I know what I just said.
And you really think that anybody who teaches religion would be a god?
Yeah, they become them. For some people in the congregation, they sure do.
Oh, well, then that's their fault. But I think that you're letting somebody's ego come in, and that's not a very intelligent, educated statement. That's something that apparently you must have thought about an awful lot, and then you just, saying it because you're saying it. But now, you see, now you're no longer a genius, Bob. I disagree with you.
Great, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Until this point, I thought you were just great.
Right, you see, you thought I was God. Thank you, Don. One line open. It's in Hillsborough County. The number 990-9352, 990-WFLA. Bert in Clearwater. Bert, you're on the air.
Bob, how you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Let me qualify what I'm about to say by simply saying, I believe in a universal intelligence and a universal energy, but I don't believe in the Bible, and I don't believe that the two are entwined. But let me also say, that I have been touched by parts of the Bible, after reading it. But I have also been touched by Sartre, by any number of pieces of literature. And I think, the Bible has some excellent passages in it that are very insightful. But I think people take...
So do the works of Karl Marx,
Excuse me?
So do the works of Karl Marx. Have some very interesting passages that are great food for thought.
Yeah, but people just take it too literally. I mean, the story about Adam and Eve. What does it matter if the characters are allegorical? If the time...
Well, you see, that's the whole point, Bert. Nobody takes it literally. Absolutely no one, including the people who say that they do. I mean, let me give you an example. Jerry Falwell, fundamentalist, right? The Word of God, word for word, comma for comma, no two ways about it. 10 years ago, Jerry Falwell thought the Bible was telling him to dump on black people. Now he says, no, it's not. He rejected a portion of the Bible. So we all do the same thing, just now we're talking about differences of degree.
Right, to what extent?
Exactly.
Huh.
And how presumptuous of somebody to read between the lines of God's book. Well, no, that's not what God really meant. Yeah, I know that a lot of people have interpreted it that way, but what God really meant was... How presumptuous.
Yeah, it's true. But, it's amazing that there are, the Ten Commandments, okay? You have the Ten Commandments, and then there's a lot of contradictory in the Bible, a lot of self-contradictory in the book itself. And I mean, if anything rings so true of man itself, it's duality. I mean, you're talking that just the fact that it's self-contradictory just puts man's signature all over it and has nothing of God. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And the Ten Commandments? I mean, that rings so true of mankind. It's...
Which version of the Ten Commandments did you have in mind?
Well, the most popular one, Bob.
Well, which one's that? There are two different versions, you know.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yep.
Give me the two.
Okay, well, they both deal with keeping holy the Sabbath. One, you keep holy the Sabbath to celebrate the Passover. The other, you keep holy the Sabbath because that's the day, the seventh day God rested. Two different reasons for keeping holy the Sabbath.
Well, I'm talking about basically the thou shalt not kill.
Oh, is that now? Wait a second. Is that thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not murder? Big difference.
Well,
kill who? Murder what?
Basically kill. I mean, most of the commandments generally are just basic rules of society. And any society, whether they have the Bible or not, has these rules.
Yep.
I mean, so a bunch of men decided to put the rules of their society in writing, and it's almost an innate set of rules, with a couple of exceptions, and then they attach it to God, so they don't have to take the blame for it.
That's the whole purpose for religion, so you don't have to accept responsibility for your own shortcomings. Bert, I got to run, but I thank you much, my friend.
Good, Bob.
You too. One line available in each county. To Charlie Davis, we go in the WFLA news booth. Charlie?
Thank you. St. Petersburg police say a tornado
insanity in the first degree.
Oh, absolutely.
I will permit no one to blame that on God.
And as far as we women and all female animals suffering in childbirth, that has to do with the physical things that take place in the act of getting the child out of the womb, or the kitten or puppy or what have you. It has nothing to do with punishment.
Well, of course, but the ignorant people who wrote that were just as ignorant about, trees needing sunshine to grow. That's why they created the sun after the trees.
Well, I feel a little bit better now. I just obviously can't talk on my feet as well as you can. But, and also I thought it was a very interesting point that these things that you and I and others like us, these conclusions that we have arrived at, we did on our own over years and years of thinking, contemplating, and questioning.
And without the threat of everlasting punishment.
Right.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Moose.
Be good. Two lines available, both in Hillsborough, 990-9352, 990-WFLA. Annie in Palmacia. Annie, you're on the air at WFLA. Hi.
I agree a lot with what you said today. And like the lady just said a little while ago, childbirth in pain. It must be the easiest pain to forget. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many of us around. Another thing, there is one supreme being, as you believe in, or I believe in.
I don't know that there's a supreme being. I suspect there is, but I don't know that there is.
Well, let's say,
I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say there is. How do I know?
Well, like I say, how do we know? It's all as come back to what you believe in. You only get out.
Well, no. You're talking about what you wish. I wish there was a supreme being. That I have no problem in saying. I really wish there was.
If we go that route.
But the only way I would know whether or not there was to have intelligence and understanding far greater than I've been given.
Well, neither one of us have that intelligence.
Nobody does.
So therefore, you take what you think or what you would like to believe in. And it's a tool that you use. And whether it's in your work, as you sit there and you're a talk show host, or anything else, you only get out of what your individual self puts into it. As health, like you cut your finger, you say, oh God, or you say GD. But how many times in your lifetime that you've gone on in your household work or whatever, and you've put G-O-D in front of profanity or a being of may somebody help me?
I don't speak profanity.
Oh, I've heard you say a few words. We all have.
Well, that's not profanity. That's not obscenity.
No, I guess it isn't.
They're just words.
Agree. I guess it is.
Just words.
It is the misuse of words, or whatever perspective you
Being rather
give.
presumptuous of you to say I'm misusing them, isn't it?
No, dear, no, you're right. I got to agree. You're right. I use the wrong phraseology that way. But, like I say, I was raised in the Catholic Church, okay, as a child. In New England, if you didn't go to Mass and sit in that pew, my goodness, you didn't sit at my grandmother's table. I married out of the Catholic religion, okay? Married by a JP. Well, they thought I was the black sheep of the family. But my phraseology to them was, when you support my children, you pay my rent, and whatever, then you mind my business.
Well, I think really what it goes to beyond that in terms of your grandmother not allowing you at the table is that she was, I suppose...
She was an Irish
playing, no, what she was doing was she was playing God herself.
That's
Again,
right.
Very presumptuous. Thank you, Annie. I appreciate. Let's go to Dan in Tampa. Dan, you're on the air, WFLA.
Bob?
Yes, sir.
I believe that everything you have said actually is true. I'd like to go a little beyond that, if I may. And if there's something that you can't see in what I'm saying, please ask me what you base that on so I can explain it. But I do, first of all, let me clear three things here. When you say the book, you mean the Torah, the Old Testament, the Koran, the Old and New Testament, the Veda, any book that professes to say it comes from God. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So do I. Then also the word God, you mean by that word Jehovah, Allah, Brahma, Buddha, whatever it is you wish to attribute as the great super...
Dan, don't ask me dumb questions. It really annoys the hell out of me.
Some people, not to you. I know you understand that.
Well, Dan, I'm in charge. Dan, I'm in charge of the show, and I don't need somebody to call me up so that they can guide me for the rest of the audience to understand it. It really angers me.
I'm not just talking to you. I'm also talking.
Well, no, I beg your pardon, sir. You are just talking to me.
Sir, this is public.
Sir, this is terminated. Let us go to Rich in St. Petersburg. Rich, you're on the air, WFLA.
Yeah, Bob, how you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Yes, I just right along with what we were talking about here. It always made me wonder, why don't any of these Christians ever act Christ-like? Turn the other cheek, or do some live in poverty, or I never, like, how would they even react to you? They all call and tell you you're going to hell.
Well, now, wait a second. I beg your pardon. There are two different Christs to act like, and most people choose the one that gets involved in symbolism and ritual and spirits and goblins and, threatens people. Those, there are two different Christs. One is much easier than the other one.
Mm-hmm. The one that forgives people.
Yeah.
Forgives ignorance. I mean, I guess that's what you and I are. We're ignorant. And we're not to be condemned to hell for just not having... I'd love to believe in God, too, but I just am not able to realize whatever he is. Another thought is, I know darn well if Christ came back to earth nowadays, that these Christians would be the first ones to crucify him, teaching all this stuff, especially if he was black or he was, Perry thought, Oriental or something a little different than
or
them.
Jewish.
He'd be gone. He wouldn't even make it 33 years, that's for darn sure. Another one is, why would the Supreme Being give us a brain and the power to reason and then expect us to take dogmatic nonsense from some book that was written by about 900 million people and say, if you don't believe this, it goes against everything your logic and anything else tells you. If you don't believe this, you're going to go to hell. And as for that Scott, I wonder, I heard him on Paul Gonzalez about 3 years ago. He hasn't had a job in about 20 years. He lives with his mother. Now, is this God's plan? All he does is sit around reading the Bible. He's so afraid to question anything. If that little geek ever used his head, it'd be a miracle. I just can't believe that this is what he's going to go to hell. If by his definition, he's not living up to his capabilities. I sure wouldn't think, would you?
Couldn't phrase it better myself. Thank you, Rich.
Okay.
Take care. 1 more hour yet to go. Please, whatever you do, don't venture very far. Period, so don't kid yourself.
Well, no, I know I can't. I really can't. As a matter of fact, I'm one of the people who called a month or so ago because I listen to you a lot. I don't get to hear everything, but I made the comment that I could prove to you that the gospel of Jesus Christ was true. Well, that was a little misleading because I feel that I could really put you in a position that you could prove it to yourself because you're the only one that could. Nobody else can prove that.
Tom, there is no one that will ever convince me that God is a monster or that God lets people off the hook who are foul, evil people. There's no one that will ever convince me that there are devils and demons. They do not exist. These are absurdities. There is no one that will ever convince me that God went to a wedding reception and turned the water into wine. These are absurdities, Tom.
Well, with what the Christian churches are teaching today, Bob, I can see where you feel that way. You see, but
your church teaches the same thing, Tom.
Would exist if all the Bibles in the world had been destroyed. Because a lot of Christians will say that there's no other scripture, but I think, you like to say, well, you can think what you want and you can't tell I know, but there is. I'm telling you now.
I know the gold tablets that got lost. I know all about the other scriptures, Tom.
You know all about the other scriptures?
Yeah, the gold tablets that were misplaced.
Yeah. You've studied them? You've read the Book of Mormon?
I'll wait until I see the gold tablets.
Well.
What happened to them, Tom?
What?
What happened to them?
There's several people. I think there's about 9 people who have testified that they've seen them.
Oh.
See, I'm not. Every time I call, I've only called you about 3 times, but you always want to jump from page 1 to page 35.
No, Tom. That is page 1. You're the one that starts on page 35. I bring you back to page 1.
No. What I say, it's not a question of
the gold tablets. Well, they were the gold tablets were misplaced. Isn't that special?
They were sealed up. They're sealed up. Bob, the thing of it is, we have so much truth now that we can't cope with it. What are we going to do with more? Truth will be revealed in the world as the people can deal.
What are we going to do with more truth? Did you really say that? Did you really say we have too much truth now? Did you really say that?
What?
Did you really say that?
Yes.
Well, then I guess a guy that believes that there's too much truth now has no problem in believing that, God brings floods to kill giraffes.
You have these religious people on your show, these Christians, and then when you get through with them, which I'm glad you didn't tear what's his name up. I heard a little bit of that. But, then you say, well, are we playing a game, or is this real, or I don't know.
No, I beg your pardon, Tom. He was not here as a Christian. He was here as a guy that lost his television show and is trying to get his life back together.
Like I said, I didn't hear it.
I couldn't think of a worse possible spokesman for the Christians than someone who had been defrocked and disgraced.
Well,
so he was not here as a Christian.
He himself up as a Christian. Like I said, I didn't hear I couldn't hear the whole show, but I certainly think he held himself up as a Christian. If not then, before, certainly.
Well, Tom, the fact of the matter is we didn't even discuss religion at all.
Well, I said I didn't hear the whole thing, but
obviously.
He's from a religious background, certainly.
Well, lots of people are from religious backgrounds that I don't even discuss religion with.
That's what I'm saying now. Why is it then that, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can tell us where we came?
Great issue. A fantastic issue. 990-9352 in Hillsborough, 461-9352 in Pinellas. Obviously, I'm in major trouble after... Where did we come from?
I said we can't get in on one phone call. Maybe we will someday, but...
Well, Tom, in a nutshell, where did we come from in a nutshell, Tom?
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
Okay. We came from the presence of our Heavenly Father who created us. You know, I made a comment one time when I was talking with you, and I said we were in heaven together, and you said, boy, I must have been on drugs that day. See, simply because it's something that you don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I think I would know if I was in heaven. I think I would know that, Tom.
What?
I firmly believe that if I had been in heaven, I would have remembered it.
Well, let me tell you, may I tell you why you don't? And why I don't?
Sure, Tom. Well, wait a second. You said that you did. Said that you did remember it. That's why I asked you what kind of drugs you were doing.
Why I do. Because, you know, the more...
Well, make up your mind, Tom. You either do or you don't remember. Which is it?